morning and welcome to the June 6, 2011 workshop of the Orlando City Council. We have two workshops today. The first is a legislative update, and then we will have a report from the chief on Ems Transport. So, Kathy Russell, you are on for an update. Looks like you have a lot of help out there, too.
Yes, I did. I kind of thought twice about this because I wanted you to continue thinking I was doing all this. But I brought in members of our team today because, as you know, we have to do there's hundreds of bills that affect the city in a lot of areas, and there's a lot of diversity with the legislature. So I brought in some of our team members today, and Robert Stewart Jr. is here. He's going to present on economic development issues, and Chris Carmody is with him, and they represent Gray Robinson. Let's see. Then we go to Kyle Shepard, who is my right-hand person at the city, does a lot of the legislative assistance in getting bills out and helping with reviewing bills and drafting, and he actually came up and testified and did a great job. Oscar Anderson will also be presenting on growth management and some other related issues in the environmental area. He's from Southern Strategy. Let's see, he brought Stacy Webb with him. She's our secret weapon with DPAC and the funding for DPAC. And Karen Peterson, last but not least, she will be talking about the fiscal issues that are definitely important to the city. I will be talking on transportation and public safety. Public safety is always our #1 issue. But there is one other issue, and that is Sunrail. This session, there was not any specific legislation on Sunrail. There was money in the FDOT's work program, but the issue was, what if harmful language was presented? So we actually had a plan to protect Sunrail if we needed to with actual legislation. That did not happen. But what the integral role that the lobbying team played was we had learned a lot from high-speed rail, and we knew that we had to educate the governor that there was distinct differences between high-speed rail and Sunrail. And some of our lobbying team had formed good relationships with his staff that ran point on transportation. So we broached them and asked them if we could have this opportunity to educate their staff and the governor. And we recommended that they meet with members of the Central Florida Rail Commission and the business community. The governor agreed to do this. Mayor Dyer just happened to be coming up in the next 2 days, so I asked, will the governor meet with Mayor Dyer when he comes up? And the governor did, and they had a good meeting. The governor brought up 3 things. He was very concerned when the 7 years were up, were we prepared to be able to maintain Sunrail, particularly if there were any cost overruns. He also wanted more information with how we prioritized a commuter rail system with some of our road money and our strategic intermodal system money. And last but not least, he wanted to know that there was broad community support. The Central Florida Rail Commission, in response, sent up a packet showing that with the most conservative ridership numbers, plus the fees that CSX and Amtrak would produce, that we felt like we could meet the requirements of maintaining Sunrail. We also had the Metro Plan send up information regarding how we prioritized, and we did this collectively. And then last but not least, we sent up 101 resolutions of support. What the integral role that the lobbying team continued to do was to gather the business community and have them go up. And we put a business team together. It was headed up by Lars Howman with the CEO of Florida Hospital. And the reason we decided to do this, we knew that the governor had been a former CEO, and we thought he would appreciate and he would listen to other CEOs, and that proved to be true. They had a very successful meeting. He again expressed his concerns about cost overruns, and he asked them, what are you going to do for Sunrail? So again, we went back and we got letters of support for Sunrail from these executives, like if they were going to subsidize their employees, what types of things they were going to do. They also wanted information regarding all of our partners, if they were going to do like reducing impact fees. We got that put together. It went via the new secretary, Passad, who was also very interested in getting this information. We were told by the governor's staff that we thought about sending up another team, but we met with the governor's staff, and here's what they said. They said, no more meetings. It is now internal. We don't need any more information. The governor will make a decision before July 2nd. And so we're standing down. I know there's been a lot of emails going back and forth trying to read the governor's mind. I don't, been there, done that. I don't know that that's a worthwhile thing to do. What I think the editorial in the Sentinel said it best, that we have done this in a measured, professional, informative way, and that showing strong support for Sunrail. And what the governor has done, to his credit, he has listened to us. So I personally am cautiously optimistic on that issue. Another issue that's near and dear to the city's heart and my heart is...
Just, Kathy, before you move on from that, another positive aspect is that he did not line item veto the funding that was in the budget related to Sunrail. If I was going to kill it, I think I would have done it in that fashion. So I think getting by the signing of the budget was very important.
The next issue is red light cameras. And as you know, we started that program as a code enforcement violation, and we were delighted after almost a 10-year effort of working on that issue that we could now do it as a uniform traffic citation. I was shocked when I went back that there was a bill to repeal the program by an incoming Speaker of the House who felt that this program was put together too quickly, that it was Big Brother, and that it would increase rear-end crashes. I testified several times that we have reduced injuries by 50%, we have reduced overall crashes by 39%, and we have reduced rear-end crashes by 30%. Somehow that did not resonate. When that bill got in trouble, they filed other bills to do like you would have to do, FDOT would have to come in and study your intersections for up to 6 months before you could put in a red light camera, or that you would have to have a certified study that your amber light, if it was supposed to be 3.5 seconds, that you would have to have that certified study. And what would happen there, all these tickets going to court, if you didn't have that certified study, which you probably couldn't get done in time, would, in the expense, would throw out those tickets. So there were several efforts to sabotage this program, and the good news is the Senate, in their wisdom, let's hope it was their wisdom, did not entertain this at all. Hopefully it's for the support of the red light camera program, but if not, this program will generate $70 million for the state, and the Senate had already put that in the budget. So if for no other reason, they're liking the money that they're getting from this program. The last criminal justice issue I want to talk about is pill mills, and I know that's been important to everybody. This is an epidemic. There were arrests made last week. That one doctor is issuing OxyContin, more pills than the whole state of California. Our state is issuing 41 million of these painkillers, which is more than the other 49 states combined. 9 people every day are dying from prescription drugs, and it's actually overtaking the people dying from illegal drugs. There was much banning going over on this bill because the governor did not want to do the prescription drug monitoring program. He saw this as an invasion of privacy. So there was a lot of controversy with this bill. It was bogged down. It was not passed until the very end, but they have put much stricter guidelines in place for these clinics trying to weed out the bad ones. There's enhanced penalties for doctors that are misusing these drugs. And then the prescription monitoring program, they've tightened that up a lot. It's a very comprehensive bill. I've asked Kim Laskoff to be here if you have any questions. If we don't have time today, she's reviewing the bill and we'll get those to you. And then secondary metals, I know Commissioner Stewart's been a champion of that. They actually had a bill monitored after our program, but in the meltdown of the Senate in the House at the 11th hour, that bill did not get, it died as long as many others died. But I do want to commend you all on these three, these issues in criminal justice, the pill mills, the secondary metal recycling, and what was the other one real quick? Yeah, so you all have taken a leadership role, and the legislature's behind you in doing this, so you should feel good about your responding first to these important issues that keep our citizens safe. The mayor said we'd be on the defensive session, and we really were, and I want to give you two examples. The first was a public works project, and we were notified, Mr. Willie Clark, I believe he's here, called the mayor's office and said, you've got a really bad bill and it's starting to move. And so the mayor called me and I thought, I don't know anything about it. I looked at the bill. It totally dismantled our blueprint. It would mandate that cities could not ask or mandate that a contractor or subcontractor, you couldn't require them to pay a livable wage, you couldn't require them to give health benefits, you couldn't require them to do a training program like a carpenter's apprentice program, nor could you require them to hire or recruit anyone from the blueprint office. So I got a team together of some other counties and Commissioner Lynham, and we were a formidable team. And if you had seen any of Commissioner Lynham's text messages, you would just know how formidable we were. But we were very successful in stopping that bill in its tracks. And then the last issue, there was an issue halfway through session of transferring county roads to cities. And I called our staff and found out that
Transferring the maintenance.
the maintenance. Oh yes, I'm sorry. We're not going there, are we, with annexation or anything? No. Mayor Jacobs, stay calm. Anyways, the transfer of the maintenance, and we had not seen the language. It was there. We contacted FDOT. Everyone thought they had signed off. We quickly got on a phone call with a bunch of cities, primarily Orange County. We tried to say, we need some qualifiers in place. If you're going to transfer these roads, the maintenance, what condition are they in? Or is it both sides of the road? Are we going to have one side the city, one side the county? Is it only 3 blocks? That type of thing. We were shut down. So we asked to meet with FDOT and put everybody in a room and not come out. We pleaded our case, and FDOT, they brought over a district secretary, their attorneys and their planners, and they said, we thought everyone had signed off on this, and if they have not, this is a matter of integrity for us, and we are going to withdraw that language, and that to me was very refreshing. So that completes my section of the report, and Robert Stewart, you're on next.
Thank you, Kathy. Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners. In the interest of time, I know you have a busy schedule here for the workshop. I'll be brief and then answer any questions that you might have. As Kathy mentioned, I'm going to report to you on a few economic development issues that ran through the session this year, and then, again, like I said, answer any questions that you might have. The first was House Bill 879, which was a bill generally related to the Qualified Target Industry Program, the QTI program as it's better known. It was a pretty comprehensive bill. The thing that was in there that's specific to the City of Orlando and to cities as a whole was a piece that your staff actually pointed out as a glitch in the law. Last year, when I say last year, now we're talking 2010 session, the legislature passed some comprehensive changes to the QTI legislation, but they left in there one particular sentence where they didn't reference municipalities. And what that effectively did was create a situation where if the city is totally running the point on the project's in the city, you're providing financial backing, you would still have to have the county be the one that coordinates with OTED in Tallahassee, because the word "or municipality" didn't exist in the statute in that sentence where it needed to be. We fixed that, and in fact, instead of just adding 2 words, we made it much clearer that if there's a project in a city where the city's running point and the city has the lead on financial obligations for the QTI program, that the city is the one that defines the wage, the city is the one that coordinates with OTED, and that takes the middleman out, so to speak, makes the QTI process run a little bit better. That was a nice victory. UCF medical school funding, again, another good year for the medical school. They were fully funded at the requested amount. They weren't touched in the veto process. A very good success for the medical school. UCF did get dinged in the veto process on some PICO funded projects, but the medical school in particular did very well. House Bill 287 was a property tax incentive bill for economic development, largely pushed by Orange County. What it effectively does is add to the existing property tax incentives for economic development all QTI industries. And those QTI industries are things like clean tech, life sciences, infotech, aviation, aerospace, homeland security and defense, those types of industries, to make sure that that local governments have the authority to go forward and do some referendum-based economic development incentives for property taxes for companies in those industries as well. That was one that we were watching. The big economic development piece this year was the reorganization. Many of you were probably watching at the beginning of session or pre-session when the governor asked for much stronger control over economic development. In fact, it was a campaign priority of his to be the lead economic development agent for the entire state. As a result of that, the House and the Senate each came out with different reorganization packages that consolidate a lot of what the state does from an economic development perspective and grant some more power to the executive office to get things done and get it done quickly. As is usually the case, the House and the Senate were in 2 different places on the bill. They met somewhere in the middle. And some of the things that the bill does, it creates the Department of Economic Opportunity with the executive director who's appointed by the governor, approved by the Senate. It consolidates much of what we now know as OTED and DCA and Agency for Workforce Innovation and the Ready to Work program, which is in DOE. That now all goes into the Department of Economic Opportunity. It places public-private partnerships largely under Enterprise Florida. Really the big winner, if there is winners in this organization package, was Enterprise Florida. They have a much higher profile. The Enterprise Florida Board, for instance, will now serve as the board of Visit Florida, of Space Florida, of the Black Business Investment Fund, and some other public-private partnerships that currently exist in statute. Space Florida does maintain its special district status, but it loses the power of its board. What is currently its board of directors becomes an advisory board, and the Enterprise Florida Board will make final decisions for them. And then for Visit Florida, they become an autonomous, they keep their autonomy, but they are a contracted entity basically with Enterprise Florida. They have their own board, but again, not as strong as it used to be. But Visit Florida did see a substantial increase in their funding year over year, a nice victory for them and good for the state as a whole from their promotion perspective. And then lastly, before I wrap up, the Economic Development Toolkit, the monies that are put in the budget every year for purposes of expanding, of recruiting business and growing business here. Enterprise Florida, again, had a good year as an entity. The actual Quick Action Closing Fund was substantially increased, as was the transportation projects for economic development was increased. Quick response training was increased. R&D tax credits were increased. And then there was a new fund created called the Florida Defense Support Task Force, and some money was put in there, $5 million, to prepare for any BRAC base relocation and closings that may happen at the federal level. So all in all, an interesting year for economic development. I think really at the end of the day what you'll see as we go forward into next session is more targeted ideas for ways to really grow the economy now that the reorganization package is in place. Enterprise Florida will have its heightened role. The new department will be up and running, and the governor will have what he asked for, or at least part of what he asked for, and he can begin to get to work on the things that he views as a priority. So with that, that's what Kathy asked me to cover, and I'll step aside and then answer questions later. Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners. Kyle Shepard, Assistant City Attorney. I'm going to go over just two bills real quick here with you, one that passed and one that did not pass. I'll start with the one that didn't pass, and that was I say ours as in the City of Orlando's Senate Bill 1010, which were our proposals to amend and streamline the Neighborhood Improvement Act. And as you know, we're getting ready to introduce an ordinance here that would create our first neighborhood improvement district for the downtown South area. And as we were investigating that statute, getting ready to use it in the downtown South area, we found that the statute was a little cumbersome, a little bureaucratic, and really had some room for improvement. There was some ambiguous language in it that made it a little difficult to use. So we proposed some amendments to that statute, which is Part 4 of Chapter 163 of the Florida statutes. We managed to get a bill sponsor in both the Senate and the House. In the House, it was Darren Soto, and in the Senate, it was Representative Simmons. In the Senate, we got 3 committees of reference, and we got 2 unanimous votes of approval, right? In both of those committees, we got unanimous votes to move it on. Unfortunately, politics got in the way, and there were other priorities in the legislature, and it didn't proceed on past that. But it wasn't because of the merits of the bill we were proposing. So we hope that maybe next year we'll take more or less the same bill and try to find a House sponsor and Senate sponsor again. We can and will proceed with an ordinance for your consideration here in the next few weeks to create the Downtown South Neighborhood Improvement District. It would be easier to administer and to manage the Neighborhood Improvement District if at some point here in the near future we could get the legislature to streamline the statute. But it does not make it impossible to use, and we still think it's a good thing to try to help redevelop that part of town, and hopefully once we get a little experience with it, we can use it in other parts of town if you have a neighborhood district that could use some capital improvements and some special attention. So we hope to see that come back in the future, but if not, we'll make do with what we have. The outline of that particular bill, what we were trying to do is first and foremost strip out a lot of the bureaucratic red tape, a lot of the requirements for special studies, particularly related to crime prevention, that were placed in the statute a number of years ago, about 20 years ago, for the purposes of administering a federal and state grant program that does not exist anymore. And so we're able to half the size of the statute, just cut it in half, and make it a lot easier to administer, a lot more cost-effective for the local government to administer. There was also some ambiguous language and some unclear language about whether the neighborhood improvement districts had the authority to themselves borrow money. One part of the statute said that they did, but the Attorney General's office said that that authority was not as clearly delegated to the neighborhood improvement districts as it should be, and so said that these neighborhood improvement districts could not directly themselves borrow money, which is an important power and an important authority to have when you're trying to put in place capital improvements. You're just never going to have the proceeds available at one time to purchase the capital improvement program up front. So we had put some language in there, proposed some language that would make it clear that the neighborhood improvement districts had the authority by themselves to borrow money without the need of the local government, the sponsoring local government borrowing the money on behalf of the neighborhood improvement district. We also clarified some language in there related to special assessments to make it clear who got to vote for the special assessments, and also increased the authority of the special assessment from $500 to $1,500 per year. You don't have to do that, but it's $500 was viewed as too low to do much with. Again, we hope to have that back in front of the legislature next year. Again, it got a unanimous vote in two committees, but just sort of died on the docket after that. All right. The next bill I want to go over is House Bill 7207. And this is a very important bill, and one that we're going to talk about more over the coming months, because it fundamentally changes one of the big statutes and bills that we deal with every day here, and that was the Growth Management Act. The Growth Management Act, as we know it and as we have worked with it over the past 25 years, does not exist anymore. The Growth Management Act, the original one, was enacted in the mid-'80s, and it was different than growth management acts in a lot of other states in that future land use maps and comprehensive plans that local governments put together, the planning board put together, amendments to those were generally reviewed by the state, a central department at the state that reviewed all the changes of that local governments would make to their comprehensive plan, that agency being the Department of Community Affairs. The Department of Community Affairs does not exist anymore, as you heard. The responsibilities that the DCA had were taken apart and given to different agencies of the state, including the office of the executive offices of the governor, and then also the new Department of Economic Opportunity. The central land planning agency, which was the Department of Community Planning, Division of Community Planning within the Department of Community Affairs, was put within the Department of Economic Opportunity. But it is much smaller than it was before. Okay, so before you had roughly 80 or so employees in that division, and that's been cut down to around a dozen or so. Okay, so it's much, much smaller. The reason it's much, much smaller is that they have far less review authority than they did before. Okay, so instead of most, if not all, plan amendments going to the DCA for review, and then the DCA having the authority to object, review, and to comment those plan amendments, that by and large does not exist anymore. Okay, so I'm going to go through just some of the highlights here, but understand that this so fundamentally changes what we do in our planning and zoning division that we're going to come back at some point and go through this with a little more detail. One thing, the Florida Administrative Code, the Rule 9J5, has been done away with. Okay, the important provisions of 9J5 have been taken out of the Florida Administrative Code and put in the Florida statutes. There's an additional permit extension. You remember back when Senate Bill 360 was first enacted 2 years ago now, I'm losing track of time, 2 or 3 years ago, there was a permit extension in there where land development orders that the city had granted got a 2-year extension. Well, there's another 2-year extension. Okay. Now, we've been keeping track of those permit extensions here in-house for things like master plans and PDs and so on and so forth. We actually haven't received nearly as many as you might think. And I think the reason for that is probably that a lot of the plans that were, or a lot of land development orders that were received back during the boom are simply not marketable anymore. And so rather than extending a project out by getting extensions, a lot of developers and property owners are simply coming back in and re-envisioning their project altogether. So we haven't seen as many of those as you might have thought. Okay, first of all, dense urban land areas still exist. We are a DULA, dense urban land area. We have been since the Senate Bill 360 from 2009. And those still exist under the Community Planning Act. DULAs are exempt from DRI review, so if you have a large-scale development, you no longer have to go through the DRI process. You still have to do an EAR, an evaluation and appraisal report, every 7 years, but the only thing that you have to do with your EAR every 7 years is you have to incorporate any statutory changes to the Community Planning Act into your growth management plan every 7 years. Okay, so you don't have to go through and do a wholesale evaluation of your comprehensive plan. As far as comprehensive plan amendments go, there are no more limits on the number of plan cycles you can have. Okay, so before you had 2 cycles per year. There are no more cycles. If you come in and an applicant wants to amend the comprehensive plan or the city wants to amend the comprehensive plan, there's no limit to when you can do that. You can start that process at any time. Okay, that's the big change here. Okay, so you won't see those cycles anymore. All local governments now, regardless of their size, go by the expedited review process now. Okay, under the expedited review process, communities can initiate a comprehensive plan amendment at any time. You hold a public hearing, and you transmit that plan amendment to certain state agencies. Okay, the Department of Transportation, the Department of Environmental Protection, the Water Management District, the county if you're a municipality, and so on. And those agencies have 30 days in which to provide comment to you. But what they're allowed to comment on is very limited now, okay? And that includes the Division of Community Planning. They can only comment on important state facilities. Okay, now there's still a lot of debate about what that means. It's not clear yet what an important state facility is. There's some delineated in the Act, but for the most part, it's going to be left open to local governments and state agencies to determine what precisely an important state facility is. Okay. After that, you hold a second hearing within 180 days of receiving comments. After that, you transmit the adopted amendment to the DCA within 10 days, and then DCA notifies the local government if the amendments are complete 5 days after that. And then you have an effective date of 31 days after the DCA notice of completeness. Okay, DCA can still challenge if they find your plan to be incomplete, if your transmittal is incomplete, or if it somehow violates impacts an important state facility. You still have small-scale amendments, so small-scale amendments will still proceed the way they proceed now. Those are amendments to the future land use map of under 10 acres, though they're a little more, they're a little easier to do now because you don't have the density cap of 10 dwelling units per acre, and it no longer prohibits small-scale process for properties that were granted a change in the last year. Okay, so you may see a few more small-scale amendments now. There's still a state-coordinated review process that is a lot like the current review process with DCA, but those are only for ear-based amendments. Okay. Finally, a number of the iterations of this bill throughout the session did away with the local government comprehensive planning certification program. You know, we're one of the just 2 or 3 certified communities in the entire state of Florida, us and Lakeland and maybe one other city. And that gives us an expedited review. It gave us less state review under the old Growth Management Act. A lot of the versions of the bill did away with the certification program. This bill, however, keeps the certification program, so we're still a certified community. Now, the question is whether there's any benefit to continue being a certified community now that you have this expedited review process, and there is. There's still reason to be a certified community, in that under the certified program, you get faster expedited review because it eliminates the 30-day review by state agencies. So it still makes sense to continue being a certified local government like we are now. Keep in mind our certification expires in 2014, but it still makes sense to keep it. Other than that, there's no longer a requirement for a mandatory public school facilities element. Annual updates of the capital improvement schedule is not considered a GMP amendment, okay? Any longer. And finally, and this has gathered a lot of attention in the media, there's no longer state-mandated concurrency for parks, schools, and transportation. Okay? It's not state-mandated. Local governments can choose to keep a concurrency management system for those facilities, but it's not mandated by the state any longer. Okay? Those are sort of the highlights. There's more in the bill. The bill is 350 some odd pages long. But if you have any questions about it, get with us. We're still planning and legal. We're still going through it. We're still trying to understand all the nuances of it. But as we get our arms around it and come up with an implementation plan, we will come and brief each of you that would like to hear more about it. Okay?
Commissioner Sheehan?
And Kyle, I'll be brief, but I'm the member of the East Central Florida Regional Planning Council. Unfortunately, I missed the executive meeting this morning, which we're trying to figure out what we're supposed to do because all the funding was cut for the East Central Florida Regional Planning Council to operate it. So while there's no state-mandated concurrency and all this other stuff, we're basically being told, okay, still do the Planning Council, but you don't have any staff, you don't have any money. So I don't know how we're going to make that happen, but unfortunately, because I'm here, I'm missing that meeting, but you know, I'll definitely be interested, you know, from hearing from y'all and from hearing from that, you know, agency how we're supposed to move forward in the future.
Okay. All right. Excuse me. Okay, next up is Oscar Anderson. Oscar's with Southern Strategy and helped us out a lot during the session, as he always does. Oscar used to work in the growth management field and always seemed to be right around the corner right when you needed him in Tallahassee. It seems like he has some ESP, and he just sort of always knew when to walk around the corner when we most needed him. He's here to talk to you a little bit about some other growth management and environmental stuff.
Thanks, Kyle. Mayor, Commissioners, how are you all? Kathy asked me to talk about some environmental and some housing issues, and I'm going to try to be brief here. I know we're running a little long. First, on the environmental front, two topics, Florida Forever and the water management districts. As you may or may not know, the last few years, the legislature has not funded Florida Forever except a $20, $30 million level. This year, the legislature decided to give more budget authority to DEP to, if they sold surplus lands, they could convert that and they could bond that, convert that, and purchase property. It was part of that $305 million that was allocated was part of the governor's vetoes, so that's not allowed anymore. So basically, DEP is forced to, if they sell surplus land, it goes back into the trust fund, and it's available for next year or to be swept next year. As it relates to the water management districts, as you may or may not have heard, they were given sort of a cap on their funding level. And it's interesting the way they wrote that. Basically, they put the dollar amount that those water management districts are allowed to have for their total budget, and if they want to change it, they have to come back to the legislature and ask for that number to be changed through a bill, a statutory change. They also did a couple other things like require the Legislative Budget Commission and folks like that to have some say in the water management district budgets. So it was definitely a big change for them as it relates to the legislature. On the housing front, as you know, for the last 4 or 5 years, the legislature has swept most of the funds out of the Housing Trust Fund, the infamous Sadowski Act, and they did it again this year. They did leave $75 million bits and pieces to fund the seed fund for the governor, which is his economic development fund. He asked for about $300 million, I think, and they only funded $75 million. They used those Housing Trust Fund dollars for that. The other thing they did, which was very relevant, is, as you know, there was a cap instituted on the Housing Trust Fund several years ago, and for the first time, they passed a bill that almost passed last year that removed the cap. Now, it's a little bit of a interesting conversation because there's not any funding in there, and they sweep it. So, but the cap has been removed, so when the economy turns around and those dock stamp receipts start flowing back into the trust fund, there'll be money available again for the affordable housing issues that are out there in Florida. Robert touched on the reorganization. Florida Housing Finance Corporation was one of those entities that got wrapped up in the new Department of Economic Opportunity. Finally, two other quick issues. One is DPAC. As you know, there's been some state funding for DPAC that's been out there that we've fought very hard every year to try to revert back into the state treasury. We were successful in doing that again, and so that money's still there and available for the city. And finally, on the expressway authorities front, there was a lot of conversation related to the expressway authorities this year. It started with a proposal in the Senate Transportation, Tourism, Economic Development Committee that would consolidate the Orlando Expressway Authority, the Tampa Expressway Authority, and 2 bridge authorities up in the Panhandle and roll those into the Turnpike under the auspice that it would generate some more revenue, better bonding capacity, and a few things like that. The House members here in our delegation were very strong, and in Tampa as well, and said, we don't think that's a bad idea. And so late in session, the Senate sort of abandoned that proposal. Just when you think it's over, what did Yogi Berra say? It's deja vu all over again. About the last week of session, there's always a big DOT transportation package that sits out there at the Capitol, and there was an amendment filed by Senators Gardner, Simmons, and Hayes to take the construction of the Wekiva Parkway away from the Orlando Expressway Authority and give it to the Turnpike. It was a little bit of a surprise. It was part of the conversation about the whole consolidation, but a surprise nonetheless. It was an amendment to that transportation package. As Kathy alluded to, the big House and Senate meltdown that occurred in the last day, the transportation package was never considered in the Senate, so the amendment just died with that. The Expressway Authority, I know, has had, and I think there was an announcement with Secretary Prasad from DOT to create a working partnership with DOT to get that Wekiva built in the near future. So I think I'm done. Karen Peterson, you're up.
Mm-hmm.
Just as Oscar's sitting down, the amendment was not only to take the construction away, but also to require the Expressway Authority to pay $50 million a year towards the construction. So initially you think, oh, that's a good thing. Turnpike Authority's going to build it. But then there was a little string attached to it. Karen.
As there often is in the legislative process. Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm Karen Peterson, and not only do I have the pleasure of batting cleanup here, I'm also standing in for Bill Peebles, my partner, who is away. Unfortunately, had travel previously scheduled, so he sends his regards, and I'll do my best to stand in as I can. I'm going to be covering a series of financial issues for you, one of which I think has already been addressed, but revenue limitations. I think last year, this time, we felt like we had dodged a bullet. There was tremendous focus on the part of the Senate President in particular, an interest in imposing something that's known nationally, and it's part of legislation that has been enacted in some states nationally, called alternatively smart caps, or TABOR. And the purpose of that legislation would have been to impose an absolute cap in tax increases that could be levied by local governments from year to year. So this would be actual dollars, revenues collected. Some concern on the part of the Senate President that what's in the Constitution today is not sufficiently tight. So we geared up literally all summer and into the fall in a strategy and how to address that, and were actually surprised this year when the Senate President's approach changed. And he ultimately focused on state government as opposed to local governments. But having thought we dodged that bullet, a new one came up. We have two joint resolutions that would propose to amend the Constitution that will impose a cap on increases in property valuation for non-homestead property that is comparable to what's in the Constitution today for Save Our Homes. That, despite substantial local government opposition, as you would imagine, and there's a number of figures out there in terms of what the financial consequence will be ultimately, what this will do is cap the increases to 5%. So the effect of it ultimately will be it's going to give a benefit, we believe, to existing businesses as opposed to those that are coming new into an area. And two, it will cost shift tax increases onto homestead properties because ultimately that's the only way the numbers will work. It will also obviously have a significant impact on local government's abilities to collect as well. That resolution, again, it does require voter approval. It does not go to the voters for another year. So one of the commitments that was made to a member of your local delegation, Senator Simmons, was that there would be an opportunity to come back and work on that legislation and tweak it as appropriate to try to minimize some of the impact. And there were lots of conversations, different plans as to how that might be done. I guess we'll see whether, in fact, that is something that that does occur in the coming session. Another issue related to revenues, one of importance, especially given the conversation about the DPAC funding, relates to the issue of online travel companies and whether the difference between the wholesale price that's negotiated by a travel company and collected from an individual, different from the resale price that's ultimately paid for a hotel room by a visitor, whether that increment remains taxable. And I know there was recent newspaper coverage, big media coverage locally on this, and there's been a lot of litigation activity recently also related to this as well. And the impact is whether your tourist development taxes, convention taxes, whether the state sales taxes would be collected on that margin. I talked to Orange County. Apparently, their estimate, they've got a big broad estimate for it right now, is it could be as much as between $5 to $8 million annually. Obviously, that number is going to move depending on what collections are, but it's money. It's some significant money. The issue's been around for a while. It first came up in 2004. There's been litigation that's been filed, and as I said, there's been more litigation. Even recently, there were 3 cases filed against Broward County within the last week by some of the online companies trying to get out of that responsibility. Orange County has had a case pending also to try to establish the obligation and the responsibility for these companies to collect on the margin. So it's still an open question, and I guess the concerning part of it for us is that, again, there has been legislation in multiple years. It has passed the House twice. This year it had passed, and it was frankly set and in the queue to be passed by the Senate, and I think Kathy used the terminology, the meltdown towards the end of session, and that's probably what saved it this year again. Going forward, we need to look at a new strategy. We need to look at a way to be able to utilize and leverage the impact on state revenues, quite frankly, because it's not just local governments who will lose under this. It's also going to be state revenues. And we need to be able to point to legislators in times when we're trying to cut budgets because we're having a shortage, that this is an opportunity for us to be able to, that the state should be maximizing its collections and that this is on place. So 2012, it's not a slam dunk. It's not a surefire. It's going to be another fight that we're going to fight. But again, we'll be continuing with it again. Another issue in the area of tourism is vacation rentals, and very briefly, there was legislation this year that expanded the definition of what is a vacation rental to include properties, single-family properties in particular, or duplexes or quadruplexes that are rented short-term and used basically as transient housing. The legislation, again, expanded the definition and then created a preemption for local governments to be able to prohibit the siting of those or the regulation of those. You have an ordinance in place. We were able to get a grandfathering clause in there, so your ordinance is protected, but we did want to make sure that you were aware of that. And then the last issue that I wanted to touch on very quickly relates to another trust fund sweep. You heard about the sweep of the Housing Trust Fund. There was also a similar sweep of the State Transportation Trust Fund. And I guess to some degree that's becoming old hat. This is, I think, the third year that we will have reported to you that there was an effort by the legislature to do that. You'll recall that last year the legislature tried a new twist, which was to tie the sweep to funding for education, thinking that would make it veto-proof. Governor Christ, in fact, did veto that sweep, so the legislature came back again this year and with a $150 million sweep, which was again tied to education, although I'm told it may have been tied a little tighter in the way it was set up. There was a tremendous effort on the part of the transportation builders, as you would expect, the proponents of the road building industry in particular, to encourage the governor not to veto, the concern being that road building is one of your surefire economic drivers and that there are jobs associated with road construction. He did veto. I think there was some, again, as I explained, this was tied to education, so some concerns that education couldn't take another hit given the other cuts it had taken in the budget. The DOT is still in the process of trying to estimate what the ultimate impact to the work program will be of that $150 million. The preliminary number was something around $300 million. The very, and I say very preliminary number for District 5 was that it would be about 50, but don't take any of those numbers to the bank. They're still, as I said, trying to work out the details. And I think it's important that in addition to that sweep, just as the Sadowski Trust Fund is going to have money diverted in the future towards the governor's economic development trust fund, so too there is money that historically has gone into transportation that also has been diverted, and it'll be approximately $190 million over a 3-year period starting in 2012. And again, arguably, the source of revenue that is being diverted is actually from dock stamps, and some of those dollars are directed today towards economic development. So, I mean, there may be a wash here. It's too soon to tell. It's going to depend on how they're ultimately used. But just to let you know, there's at least 2 hits to transportation funding, or 2 changes in the process and the use of funds related to transportation projects. So with that, I close, and thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you today.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathy and team. Questions or comments? Anybody? Commissioner Diamond, then Commissioner Lynham.
Thank you. I was just curious, in all the talk about Florida Forever not being funded and some comments about the water management districts, where does that leave the proposal that Governor Christ had a couple of years ago to buy a substantial amount of land to help protect the Everglades? And I think it was going to be the largest land purchase ever. And I'm just curious where all this leaves that.
I'll answer a little bit, and then Oscar, if he knows, but I know that there's been some talk of selling less desirable conservation lands to protect. It's their only option they have left of trying to protect and purchase the more desirable lands. I don't know, Oscar, if you have anything else. But as you can see, the money's not there. I think what the governor envisions, these big landowners will start being our conservationists, because they will develop, say they have, 200 acres or 2,000 acres, they'll develop maybe 200 acres and then set aside. So that was one of the plans that was with the Secretary Bazette at that time promoting, and I think that's underlying in the direction they want to go, that it'll be private landowners conserving portions of their land.
And then I know they scaled that original plan back on the purchase of the sugar land, but did they even ultimately go through with that purchase, Oscar? I don't think so either.
But I don't believe they ever did.
Yeah.
Well, and I was interested with all the discussion about the water management districts, because I think the South Florida Water Management District and part of the city is actually in that district. I was curious about, are they still able to do this, and where does that stand?
I don't know. The new secretary was one of the governor's staff appointments, and she's now the secretary of the Southwest Management District. Do you want to add to that? Anything?
Commissioner Diamond, I don't believe it's clear at this point, because the cap, I think South Florida, if I can recall, I think was an 18% budget cap for them, reduction, and then a hard cap, statutory cap. So I don't even think they have a full understanding of what the impact's going to be on all their land purchasing programs, even how they're going to do some of their environmental regulation and permitting exercises, because of the cuts they're going to have to make in staff and operations. So I don't think that's clear yet.
Okay. And if I could just shift over to the neighborhood improvement districts, and Kyle, this might be a question for you. You said there was some uncertainty about, I guess there were two sections of the law, and one said you could borrow, the other one said you couldn't borrow, and one of the things that your goal was to try to get some clarity and just say yes or no. Where does that leave you with an ordinance that's going to suggest borrowing? I mean, how do you borrow if you don't know whether you can borrow, and should you borrow if you don't know that you can borrow?
The ordinance that's going to come to you is not going to anticipate that the district itself will borrow money. And the reason for that is that the Attorney General has been asked, based on the current statute, what is it? Can you borrow or not? Because the statute is unclear, and the Attorney General said, when it's unclear, something like that, the power has to be very, very clear, and it's not clear. So right now, neighborhood improvement districts themselves can't be the borrower of money. Okay, and so whatever ordinance comes back to you won't anticipate the district itself being the borrower of funds if there is going to be any borrowing at all. Right now, neighborhood improvement districts largely don't. They simply go from hand to mouth. And in the future, if borrowing authority is put into the statute, we can come back and change the ordinance accordingly. But until then, they won't be able to borrow money themselves.
Okay. Thank you.
And Commissioner, that was one of the stumbling blocks of this bill in the House. They're seeing that as we're getting ready to tax people. They saw it almost as a new tax, and that was the roadblock.
Thanks. That's all I have.
Commissioner Lyon?
Thank you, Mayor Dyer, and thank you, Kathy, and for your team. Just a couple of observations. And the first one I wanted to respond to, I think Commissioner Sheehan talked about concurrency, and I think concurrency is fairly new, the last, 10 years or so. And we didn't really screw up terribly. We just thought it was another tool to use. But I know when I served on the regional plan committee, we were all pushing concurrency. But I think local governments have really gotten some parts of concurrency already embedded in how we do business. And I don't see any real bad things going to happen with this repeal. I mean, with the new policies that we're dealing with, growth management. You always want those protections from people. You don't want to come and do certain things, but I think our city is on the right path in how we handle things. So concurrency was something we were pushing in 96, 95. Just really hammering it. So I didn't see it as a boogeyman sort of thing. I mean, it's going to work out all right, I believe. But just a couple of issues. I think it was regarding Sunrail and talking about the reimbursement of riders or incentives for riders. And I remember we had a discussion here, and Mayor Dyer may have brought it up. I don't remember how we discussed it. But I remember giving a speech at Harvard on transportation and land use, and I think I mentioned then it was the state of Maryland, and that I really wanted us to look at that really provided incentives for riders on public transportation. And I'm really hoping that we can get our private sector engaged in these incentives so that when Sunrail is being built and constructed, that we have incentives from the whole alignment to say, if you ride, these are the business, whether it's the hospitals or the cities or whatever, or other private sectors, to incentivize these riders. To me, it's just critical.
Right.
Number one,
there's
it saves
actually
gas
a
money.
federal tax credit up to a couple $100. Lynx is using this. So the employers can get this and then actually subsidize their employees riding that. And several of the corporations around the stops have already committed to that.
Right. And I just think it's important to keep stressing that in the public eye, to know that we're very sensitive to this, and that it's going to be one of those things that really drive those numbers up for ridership, and it just makes sense. Commuter rail, high-speed rail, light rail, it just makes sense not only for moving us. I think it was a couple of weeks ago we talked about what gas at $10. What did you say, $10 a gallon? $5. Something that was really outrageous. But could happen. And it's this kind of public option that we have that will save us. So that was really important. But you know, the other piece, and there are lots of things we can talk about, and I want to say thanks to Willie Clark and Senator Siplin, because by the time you contacted me, we were sort of moving down that track of getting everybody onto reading. The one thing I learned a long time ago, is why we have such bad public policy. Most elected officials never read anything. They just target just what's important to them, and they may not ever read any of the long-term impact and effects for the community, and don't even know that they're screwing the very state and the people that elected them. And the very people who elected them let them keep on screwing us year after year. So maybe in the future we need some legislation that requires an aptitude test and certainly history lessons. And I think when we do that, we will not have the kind of problems we have now, because our state representative-led local boy literally moved Florida back to a conservative era that was I like the way Mike Thomas said that, one of those guys over at the paper, that was literally pre-Civil War conservatism. And I thought, maybe the next bill they're going to introduce is that maybe this is the time for the census, and maybe we're going to see who's a 3/5 of a person or 3/8, or even introduce slavery again. This thing is getting just that mean on state legislation, so we need to really pay attention locally. So with that, I know Commissioner Eames and I have to, we're going over to Jones High School graduation. That's really important to model some of these, for these youngsters on their future. Hopefully it's not in city council or necessarily government, but to go get an education in history. That's what I'm going to point to. But the part I want to say was thank you, but Kathy and to our council, I really would like to see us move on some diversifying our lobbyists. That is critical. Year after year, we see the same people, and I think our diversity and focus, like you've done, I think that's great. Each person has his own section to focus on, and that gives them better, I think, expertise. But we also need to look at We got James Harris out there, been there for years. I remember the year you brought in Yolanda Jackson out of Miami, but we've got some other people we can train, just like you've done some of the other young people. So I appreciate what you do and how you stay on board, how you stay focused. I'm just amazed at how you're able to do it very quickly and get everybody focused on what's important to us. But I am going to leave you with the thought that I believe next year I really would like to see us diversify the people who come to talk to us about what's interesting and what's important to our city. And I want to say to the chief that I really support what we're getting ready to do. I won't be here for your presentation, so you've already talked to me 100 times about it, I mean, sort of. And whatever I need to know that you're going to present, I'll take your little, if you're doing some, what do you call those things, slideshows? You give me the slides, slide presentation, PowerPoint. I'll be glad to review it as soon as we get back. But I think going over to this graduation is important. And Mayor Dyer, thank you and council very much. Thank you, Kathy. I thought you did a great job.
Kathy and team, great job this legislative session. I've been around this stuff now for, I guess, 19 sessions, and I think we have probably, if not the most effective local government lobbying team, one of the most effective, and catching some of the things that are inserted into bills, like the transfer of O&M of county roads inside municipalities. That would have been a $4 or $5 million issue for us this year if something like that had slipped through. So good intelligence going on up there. Thank you. Okay, Chief. Little EMS Transport.
Morning, Mayor and Commissioners. We just wanted to have a brief follow-up at the beginning of our proposal to do fire-based EMS transport. You asked to come back after a short period of time to give you a follow-up on where we are, and that's where we are. It's about 10 minutes just to give you an update. First thing I wanted to start with is to just confirm what you already know. You have the finest fire department in the entire United States. It is proven. We have the best equipment, the best facilities, the best training, the best standard operating procedures, and ultimately the very best personnel you can possibly hire. So with that combination, it allows you to be as successful as we've been for 126 years. So when I proposed, and when our team proposed this fire-based EMS transport to start transporting the citizens of Orlando with the Orlando Fire Department, I didn't receive much, wasn't too much of naysaying from y'all, because I knew you believed that we could do it. It's just, would it be the right thing for the city of Orlando? And so briefly, I'll tell you. Our goal still remains the same, to provide the highest level of EMS service to the citizens and visitors of Orlando. The plan that we proposed was us transporting would increase the efficiency and the continuity of patient care. And what we're seeing is, when we arrive on the scene of these patients, we're actually getting the history of what happened to them. We're talking to the patients, we're talking to the bystanders, finding out what happened. The improvement that you see in the continuity of care is those same paramedics now transfer that patient all the way through to the hospital, tell that physician exactly what the patient care condition was and what it is all the way through. On top of that, it required us to take a better look at the care we're providing, because we weren't just handing this off to another paramedic to go give a report to a doctor or physician. We had to provide that information to them. And so in doing so, it made us really look at the quality of care and make sure we were doing all the right things and delivering that to the physician, and also getting the feedback from them on our quality. Obviously, we used the SAFER grant award period, which is from August of 10 to August of 12. So we have a little over a year left in that period, so it worked out. The timing was excellent for us to do that. And of course, with your approval, we began this process on February 1st. We did it with the public-private partnership. We took our partnership with Rural Metro Ambulance, who has been working with us for the last 28 years. We added the ALS, BLS component. We do all ALS and auto accident transports, which equates to about 16,000 to 17,000 transports. And Rural Metro takes care of the BLS transports, which is approximately 8,500. In conjunction with that, they're also ALS providers. So they give us that backup and redundancy should we need their services on an ALS or we need to provide a BLS, closest person to the call, we're able to do that as well. We also added the rural metro. The enhanced feature we got was we added them to our CAD, our dispatching system. We added them to our AVL, automatic vehicle locator. We know where they are at all times. The team that's dedicated from rural metro, not their ambulance internal transports, hospital, but their actual 911 committed transports to us, we know where they are at all times. They're on our radio system now. So the streamlining and the efficiency of dispatching them immediately has improved tremendously. We're also doing monthly reviews, as promised. We're evaluating this system. It's 4 months into it. We've met with Rural Metro. Chris Blocks, the general manager, is here today. Have a tremendous working relationship with them. We've met with them monthly or sooner, evaluated this process, and just streamlining it. We've actually been able to decrease the number of units that they have in the field because of our efficiency and showing the model that's working for us. As we told you early on, we had increased from 8 to 11 rescues at Station 6, Baldwin, over by the Executive Airport, Rescue 9, the Rosemont area, and Rescue 15 down in Lake Nona. This turned out to be an excellent choice of locations. It's worked out very well for us. We were able to do this without adding any firefighters to our fleet. We have 496 field operations personnel. We still have 496 field operations personnel. We obtained a billing company, ADPI. They're well known, over 400 clients, over 60 here in Florida. Every fire department and agency surrounding us uses ADPI. We were able to piggyback on Orange County's contract. We have a contractual agreement. Things are working very well with the billing company thus far. Medicare Medicaid, we told you that was a difficult process, takes up to a year, sometimes longer. I'm proud to report that with our team working with Chief Hoggett and team, we have already received approval from Medicare, and we are receiving funds from Medicare. Medicaid must follow Medicare, and that is about 3 weeks out from receiving that, so things are right on line. Our mobile EMS reporting system is basically our ruggedized laptops. We switched to that system, so now the personnel on the scene can get these electronic patient care reports, immediately get the information in. With the cooperation of ADPI, this information, if you've run on this patient before, if they're in their system already, if they're in the Florida Hospital ORMC system, as soon as you put their name in and date of birth, name, and any other information, it populates all the information for you. It saves time, it's very efficient, and obviously helps with the billing information. Prior to starting, we worked proactively with the hospitals. We met with the Intergovernmental Relations staff, we met with the ER directors and emergency management personnel. We went in proactively and did our orientation. All of our personnel went through a hospital orientation process. They knew where the OB delivery area is, where the pediatric area, psychiatric area, all the areas that we possibly may interact with them. We proactively trained our personnel so that we can be extremely efficient in what the hospital's needs are when we arrive on the scene or into the hospital. Our local response agencies, GOA, Orange County Fire, Winter Park, Rural Metro, Health Central. We worked in advance with them so that we could work as efficiently as possible. I can also tell you that we have not had to ask for their assistance, both Orange County, Winter Park, or GOA, for any assistance with our transports thus far in our 4-month period. So it's working extremely well, this plan. Our medical directors, Dr. Rawls, Silvestri, Mascow, our liaison advisor, Dr. Faber, have been tremendously supportive and overwhelmed by the success that the Orlando Fire Department and the men and women of the Orlando Fire Department have had with this transport thus far. We've had committees, volunteers, 45 to 60 personnel that volunteer to create committees prior to transport on training, development of policies, logistics and supplies, buying the new equipment, in-servicing it, training all of our personnel. Our quality assurance, we have a team that's dedicated. Not only, it's a two-part quality assurance, the patient care and delivery of patient care, to making sure they get the proper care, the proper medications, and of course with MSTARS and the state reporting, but also on the billing side and the documentation. So it's a two-part quality assurance, which is going extremely well to team. The commitment from all OFD personnel, as I told you in the beginning, I had no doubt of the success of this plan. No doubt, because of the personnel that we have at the Orlando Fire Department. This team that you see behind me, part of the EMS staff, my deputy chiefs, Ron Glass with the local 1365, our training division, our communications managers. I can tell you, without their assistance, without their dedication to the success, we would not be where I'm happy to report we are today. So the communications took on a great deal more. With transport, they added a rural metro staffer inside their operations. We had to change some of our SOPs. Of course, now they're dispatching. Not only do they have to worry about making sure we have a pump in every territory to protect our homes, but make sure we have a rescue cover in every territory to transport these patients. So their added workload with the same amount of staffing is just a tremendous testament to their efforts. So, and of course, administrative, I mentioned some of our staff. Chief Greg Hoggett has been behind the scenes working on this thing. He's monitoring these statistics daily, weekly, monthly, and staying right on top of everything we're doing here. So to the nuts and bolts of this, if you look at your slide there, you'll see to date we've run about 6,200 transports, ALS and auto accident. Orlando has in the gold. Rural Metro in partnership has run about 2,200 BLS and occasionally assisting us with an ALS call. So we're looking at close to 9,000 runs in the first 4 months. We're able to do this. Our contractual agreement was to deliver this service, to get rescues, transport-capable units on the scene in less than 10 minutes. Of course, our ALS, all of our units are ALS providers, paramedics on every unit. They arrive within the 6-minute time frame. But our transport units, whether it be the Orlando Fire Department or Rural Metro, arrives on all scenes in less than 10 minutes, greater than 90% of the time. That is our goal, and if you see in the quotations there, we're at 93.5% to date. So we're extremely proud of the success that we've had so far. Remember, we're still early into this thing. If you'll look at our next slide here, this is what I presented to you all back in December, if you remember, our timeline. We did the agreement for 2 years with Rural Metro so that we could properly evaluate our operational and financial process through this. So here we are. We're 4 months into it. We're still in that billing lag time. We're still with the Medicare Medicaid, with the insurance companies still adapting to us being a new provider. Everything is coming along extremely well, way ahead of schedule. And our timeline, I fully expect that during that 12-month evaluation, we'll be able to come to you and make some important decisions, whether we continue this public-private partnership, whether we eventually transition to full transport in the entire city, or, which I don't expect, to digress back into private transport service. I work quickly through these slides. I can tell you any statistics you'd like to know on that. The average transport with our rescue trucks, just to give you an idea, we're averaging 5-6 calls per transport. Some of the busier ones are running 7, 8, 9. We've had rescues run up to 14 calls, but as would be common, the downtown core, Station 7, Station 2, Station 1, 6, and 11 stay the busiest, and the outlying, although the Rosemont area, Mercy Drive area stays very busy. But some of the more rural areas have to end up coming in and covering some of the areas, but it's worked extremely, extremely efficiently. At this point, I just got Angelo put together a quick 2 or 3 minute video just to give you a synopsis of what we're doing there, and then I will take any questions you might have.
Orlando Fire Department.
Someone here is having a heart attack, I believe.
What's the address of your emergency?
110 Andes Avenue.
110 North Andes?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Tell me exactly what happened.
I was walking by and I saw my coworker having lunch, and then he keeled over and is having chest pains, and he's having a hard time breathing.
Are you with the patient?
I am.
Is he breathing?
Yes, he's breathing, but he's breathing heavily.
I'm sending the paramedics to help him now. Stay on the line. I'll tell you exactly what to do next. Power of breath, chest pain. 110 North Andes Avenue, across the dead end, and Orlando Tower Road. All units confirm on LSE.
talking to you, sir. Chest pain. Go ahead and do everything. We're going to get an IV set up. Everything like that. Get set up for him. Okay, so do you have any medical problems that we didn't know, sir? No. Okay. If you take any medication? How long have you had your chest pain for? Okay, sir, we're going to do a couple things for you. We're just going to give you some things here. Just have the aspirin ready for him, too, the nitro.
Point with one finger in your chest where you're having the pain.
Right in the center.
Does the pain travel anywhere?
Up my left arm, I think.
Okay. 4 liters. How old are you, sir?
55.
Okay, we're going to have to expose your chest here in a second and go ahead and do a full swab lead on you. What do we have as your blood pressure?
123/80. I have on a monitor. Is that normal, sir?
The pain changed at all?
No, it's gotten worse.
Got worse.
All right, sir, we're going to go ahead and give you a spray of nitro. Nitroglycerin to help. Oh, sir, once we finish this, we're going to go ahead and get you down to the hospital and get you checked out, all right, sir? Any allergies? No. Any medicine? No. Any other medical history? We're currently en route with a 55-year-old male. Somebody can be chest pain.
Sometimes pictures are better than 1,000 words, they say. So this is what we do, Mayor. We appreciate your support so much. I think that the men and women are to be, besides it's just like a great sports team. It's the preparation and practice ahead of time. I think our team has done that, and then it takes the guys in the field to do the job. And as you can see here, and it's early. It's very early, but I am extremely confident that you will continue to see the positive results that you have, and we look forward to coming back and reporting to you, hopefully within the next 8 to 10 months, to let you know where we're at.
Thank you, Chief. Would you mention the save rate for cardiac patients that we have versus the national average?
Yeah. I think the national average and save rate for code saves is somebody that we have to do CPR and is 8 to 9%, and the Orlando Fire Department is at a 22% save rate.
So about 2.5 times more likely to survive if you live in the city of Orlando than the national average.
It is true, and actually that statistic was before we started transporting. So I would like to believe that our statistic would go higher based on this continuity of patient care all the way through.
Right. Questions or comments? Mr. Dunn?
Thank you. Chief, you mentioned that the fire department got new rescue units at Baldwin Park, Rosemont, and Lake Nona.
Yes.
Oh, were there already rescue units at all the other stations, or did some of the stations still not have one? Or tell me how that stands right now.
Yes, we have 17 fire stations, and we had 8 rescues in service prior to this implementation. We added 3 more, so we still have 6 stations that do not have a rescue. But with this public-private partnership and in order for efficiency, we were able to just add the 3 rescues, do all ALS and auto accidents, and of course with our partnership with Rural Metro and having their units in with our 911 system, it actually has worked out very well.
Okay. And I saw the numbers, the number of calls that you responded to. How does that compare to your projections for what you thought you'd be responding to?
Well, initially we projected that we would do 16,000 ALS and auto accidents calls, and Rural Metro would do 8,500 BLS calls. I think if you look at this is a 4-month statistic, and we're a little over 6,000, so I would think that we probably, it's hard to tell because at this projection we'd be about 18.5, but in the next months they could end up getting more BLS calls and we get a little less ALS calls. So we're right in line, if not a little higher in our projections.
Okay. And what about, I saw that there was a 90-day lag for billings and collections. Do you have any sense of that, since we're past 90 days, and I guess we're at about 120 days right now?
Well, remember, the Medicare Medicaid, or the Medicare, we didn't get until April. So we started in February, so we're behind on that. And then working through the insurance companies and getting our proper documentation in for billing. So there is a built-in lag there. But we have a pretty good handle on our billing status at this point, and we're doing very well.
Okay. What is that billing status?
Our billing
how
status,
well do you think?
we're at 6 million, 5.9 million billable to date. That's billable to date.
Billable?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How much of that have you collected?
I believe we're at 600,000 early on. But like I said, it's once the system is mature, where the billing company has all the data that normally the residents and citizens of Orlando information entailed, our personnel have the proper documentation, and Medicare, Medicaid, the insurance companies. When all that matures, you will see, obviously the numbers, our projection of at least 50% collection rate. I think you will see that, hopefully. And that's why we asked for this, and I showed that slide, to ask for this period of time for the evaluation, because it really is very early to try and evaluate financially this process. I really was presenting to you operationally where we are to this point, and we still have a lot of operational things that we want to work on as well to make this thing, to perfect it the way the Orlando Fire Department would provide service.
Okay. And so when do you think you'd have a better handle on the billing and financial issues? You think 6 months out?
Yeah, I think on that slide you see our projection was to go through next July with a true 12-month. I think we're probably looking a little bit early. I might be speaking for Ray and Rebecca a little too much, but I would think certainly by this time. I would hope by March we'd have a pretty good feel, but they may ask me to stay closer to this timeline to get past the lag and get the true operational and experience.
Okay, because it sounds like operationally you're doing very well, which I think
are.
everybody would be happy about. I think everybody probably also want to see the whole picture, though, too.
Yes, absolutely. And as soon as we can gather that data and feel comfortable with bringing you, the accurate information, we'll certainly come back to you then.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Stewart?
Thank you, Chief. Thank you for your hard work, and ladies and gentlemen of the Fire Department, thank you for what you've done. A couple of quick questions that come to mind. Ed, I'd like to look at those numbers again in terms of the responses.
I got it here.
I'm less concerned about the volume as I am concerned about the trend. I noticed that on the BLS and trend, we've run from roughly 747 now to 628. That's the rural metro coverage. Is that a trend that is expected, or is that a seasonal trend, or when you look at these figures?
There are a couple of things that come along with this. If you look at February, remember that's when we started. Mm-hmm. To be safe, we had rural metro. We relied heavily upon them just to make sure that that we worked streamline operations. So they did get an increase in volume in February. So February and early part of March, we are aberrancies that you probably wouldn't do. But and then you got to remember, is we were meeting every 3 weeks to work on the efficiencies. They don't want any more units. They work on utilization hour usage. So they don't want to have 10 rescue trucks out there that aren't transporting patients, so that we try to streamline that. So you'll see as we go along, we streamline. We found where Orlando can provide the transportation services and rural metro is able to downsize. So I think what you're seeing is, and it is early, I think as we monitor the months, you'll probably see somewhere in that range of the 600 to 700 transport range for rural metro. But those are some of the reasons that because we're working on each month, making this system more efficient for both parties, and of course the aberrancy you had in the beginning of the transport.
When did the 3 new units come online? Did they come online in 1st of February?
We did. We actually brought them on the first day, and the first day we started transporting, that day was significantly high in ALS transport. Within our first 6 hours, it was all ALS transport and no BLS. So, we were moving units all over the city, and once things settled down, it has smoothed out very well.
on a separate side note, where are we on, when we look at transport, where are we seasonally? Are we up during the summer? Are we seeing more transport because of increased traffic, vacation traffickers, or are we seeing, do you see anything that we would anticipate different than what we're doing?
No, Commissioner, we have sat with Rural Metro's got a 27, 28-year history, and we have sat down with them on many occasions and looked at trends and the history of this department or this city. There really is no significant trend that you can see where you would normally see in the snowbirds and high population. Well, the trends we do see is at lunchtime and early evening, we do see a spike, there's no question. And there is some predictability Monday through Sunday, but overall, it's consistent year-round. It really is.
The 5.9 million you mentioned, that's make sure to put it in my mind, that is billable charges that we've accrued so far?
Yes.
And we've collected about 600,000. So
That's correct.
the question is, what do we, I guess I'm asking probably along the same lines as Commissioner Diamond, what do we expect of the 5.9 million to come in?
Well, in working with ADPI, who again provides the billing service for Orange County, Osceola County, Seminole County, Winter Park, Kissimmee, all the departments and in this area, and they have a very good handle on the makeup. They felt confident, and through our research, felt confident at a 50% rate. We did present to you all a 40 to 60% range. Winter Park, I believe, is in the 60% range. Orange County's in the mid to high 50s based on when you last looked at their statistics. So I think we safely have been sticking with the 50% number. And but remember, some of this, the Medicare, we're able to back bill for. Medicaid, you cannot do. So there are some factors that come into play. But overall, I think really only time will tell. I think it's really important for us to focus today on the operational side of this thing and know that we are successful and doing extremely well. And on the financial side, I'd say we know what we've got going out billable, and I think we just need to let some time go by. And I think you should have confidence that our billing system is working, that our finance team is doing extremely well in working with Ray and Rebecca and Lori Nasser and Michelle Crimmins. I mean, we are, as much as we have prepared prior to starting transport, we're preparing on our side of our revenue side as well. So I think we just have to have confidence in the system and let this play out a little longer on their.
No, I agree. I'm not trying to pin you down. I guess the question I'm thinking is in the back of my mind is when we started this process, we thought, at least I thought, that we'd be looking at about a $6 million a year annual revenue impact. And what you're telling me is that we may be as much as $9 million impact if we collect an $18 million and collecting 50% of it. Is that kind of what we're looking at?
I think you could safely assume that based on the stats we have today. But I'm going to stay safe with the 6 to 8 million. We said 6 to 8 million projection. So if it does turn out to be 9 million, we'll.
And don't get me wrong, I'm not advocating we go spend $3 million of the money that's going to come in. That's not the case.
Yeah.
I'm more interested in terms of where we are. Some of those projections that you made, if they really need to kind of end up being amended, or if we're just going to see how they go next 6 months and then look again at the same things. But that's if we are creating this level of efficiency and this level of response, and basically at about an 18.5 response, 18,500 responses compared to what we projected at 16,000. Man, I'm just really thrilled about it. That's great news and great work by you and your leadership.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Chief, thank you very much.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay, that will conclude our workshop for today.